feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun.
Open wide for some soccer.
I don't care what you think about what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the Cowboys.
Call this college rule.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. Dom and Chris here. Before we begin, make sure that you check out our social media accounts, which are listed below in those graphics, as well as the Sports Experience Podcast on Instagram. In addition, another quick announcement. We are recording here at Engle Studio, which is available for all your audio and recording needs here in Tucson. And Chris, we got a big event coming up.
Yep.
For the podcast.
At the screening room, we'll be recording there. We'll be recording the big game, if you will. So, yeah, if you want to come check that out. Yeah.
Well, and we're in the midst of a nice little block here related to the big game.
Leading up to it.
In fact, we're going to be talking about a past big game in this episode.
Whoa. Number 23.
Number 23, one of the craziest, most exciting, heartbreaking Super Bowls if you're a fan of the Cincinnati Bengals. So it's the January 1989 game between Cincinnati and the San Francisco 49ers.
And one of the games that everybody wants the Super Bowl to be like.
Yeah.
Except for it was low scoring pretty early, but I mean, whatever. But other than that, it's just one of those where it came down to the wire. It had all of this, back and forth. And
it happened during an era where Super Bowls were not entertaining. Like they were entertaining for the teams that were bludgeoning the other squad, but just absolute boat races up for like the previous 5-6 years to this point. So finally we get a competitive Super Bowl and featuring two teams with a lot of connections between each other.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. The 1988 Bengals were led by head coach Sam Wyche, who was not only a backup quarterback for offensive coordinator in Cincinnati, Bill Walsh, under Paul Brown. He was also one of Walsh's assistants in San Francisco when they won their first Super Bowl over the Cincinnati Bengals about 7 years before.
7 years before, yeah. So this is a rematch, if you will. I thought it was interesting because you see them meet up after the game, and sometimes you see coaches just shake hands and walk past. They really embraced, because you could tell he came from his coaching staff, and he really. Him and Bill Walsh really just kind of connected on that coaching level where you're just like, oh yeah, we've worked together for decades.
Yeah, and they were similar in age too. He was like, I was a third string quarterback, and he was the offensive coordinator.
Yep.
So, the 88 Bengals were kind of a surprise team in the 87 strike season. They finished 4-11 and bottomed out in last place in the AFC Central. But they kind of put it all together this year with a fantastic offense. They were the number one scoring offense in the entire NFL that year, led by offensive coordinator Bruce Coslet. Boomer Esiason was first team All-Pro and the NFL's MVP this season.
Yeah.
28 touchdown passes. They almost had two 1,000-yard rushers, though. And as the season kind of progressed, their offense, while they still kept doing the hurry-up, and they were one of the most innovative teams at that point to start running the hurry-up offense, really good ground game and a really good offensive line behind Pro Bowler Max Montoya and future Hall of Famer Anthony Munoz. And James Brooks was their running back. He had 931 yards on the ground, 287 yards receiving, and 6 touchdowns, catches, and 8 TD rushes. But the main star was rookie Ickey Woods for the 88 Bengals. Only 10 starts, had over 1,000 yards rushing and 15 touchdowns. And his patented touchdown dance, getting some cold cuts in that Geico commercial, the Ickey Shuffle.
But he really came onto the scene right away as this rookie running back that you could almost rely on. And it was probably so easy for them to divide up the workload.
Yeah, because Brooks was your kind of shifty guy who could catch passes but also run inside. Yep. And they had a great backup in Stanley Wilson, who was back from his second drug suspension that year. And he provided We've all been there. We've all been suspended for drugs a time or two. Contributed 3 touchdowns. Eddie Brown, their main wide receiver, who was drafted ahead of Jerry Rice. He had 53 catches for 1,273 yards and 9 touchdowns, made the Pro Bowl. Tight end Rodney Holman made the Pro Bowl, and Tim McGee was a solid number 2 with 686 yards and 6 touchdowns. Like I said, they were the number one scoring offense in the league in total points. Their defense, they ran a nice 3-4 scheme under defensive coordinator Dick LeBeau, who coached forever as a defensive coordinator in the league. They're starting to run this zone blitz defense that was kind of designed to stop West Coast offense teams like the 49ers.
Yep.
Kind of cover the field. They were kind of a middle-of-the-pack defense, but they were led up front by Tim Crumry, who was an all-pro this season at nose tackle. 152 tackles at nose tackle and 3 sacks. That was amazing.
Well, I saw going into this game, I think they were ranked like 15th in points allowed, so they weren't the best defense, and that's what everybody was saying was where the 49ers were going to excel was obviously they have a great offense, and they're matching up against what would be considered a mediocre defense.
Yeah, but they could get turnovers. They could get sacks and turnovers. Jim Scow had 9.5 sacks. Backup Jason Buck had 6. And then their defensive backs, Eric Thomas made the Pro Bowl with 7 picks. Lewis Billups had 4. And then David Fulcher had 5 interceptions as well as made the Pro Bowl 2 for their defensive team. They were, but 16th in points allowed. You were thinking
16th, yeah.
That's kind of a big disadvantage for them. But
just in matchup going into it, you know.
Yep, special teams was solid. Jim Breach only attempted 16 field goals, so they were a pretty damn good red zone offense.
Yeah.
Anything inside of 50, he was pretty good. Scott Fulhage was their punter, and then Stanford Jennings, their backup running back, was a pretty good kick returner for them this season. 684 yards and a touchdown. The Bengals were probably one of the hottest teams out the gate in '88. They started 6-0 and ended up finishing 12-4 to get the AFC's top seed. Advanced in the divisional round against Seattle. 3 rushing TDs, 2 by Stanley Wilson, which was dope, and then 1 by Ickey Woods. They were dominant on the ground in the AFC playoffs. Woods had 126 yards in their 21-13 win. Brooks had 72 and Wilson had 45. So it's coming at a time because in both of these games, Esiason is not playing well. And you can kind of see that's where their bread's going to be buttered in this game against the 49ers, controlling the clock.
Well, it seems like, especially going into it, controlling the clock, and if Boomer doesn't get going, we can just easily rely on this dual running game that we have going on.
Totally.
And that's kind of how they were playing all season, and we kind of see it happen in the game.
Yeah, because this is in the AFC title game against Buffalo. They were all concerned about their hurry-up offense, but they were up 14-10 at one point, and Ickey Woods' TD rush kind of put them ahead, along with a Brooks TD catch. They had 3 picks in that game and ended up winning 21-10 to advance to the Super Bowl. Woods had another 100-yard game, so you're thinking, like, there's a recipe in place to stop the 49ers.
Yep.
88 49ers were an interesting team, though. They were coming off the best record in the league the year before, outside of a divisional round playoff upset, which almost shook up the whole organization against the Vikings. Joe Montana was kind of struggling with back problems, and Bill Walsh was trying to work Steve Young in this season.
I was going to say, we see aging Montana, and we see a young Steve Young. I think Steve Young got like 3 games under his belt, so I think he went 2-1. And then there was that kind of question where, are we going to go with Joe, or are we going to bring this young in to take over? And obviously, towards the end of the season, they just kind of went back with Joe, which just makes sense.
Well, they were kind of a transitioning team because you had a lot of old holdovers from the 81 and 84 championship teams, but a lot of younger guys kind of starting to step in. And they kind of went through some bumps. Like, they started the year 6-5.
Yep.
Didn't know who the hell they wanted to start at quarterback, but quarterbacks coach Mike Holmgren said, Bill, you just got to make a choice. Make a choice and we'll ride with it. But, like, you can't keep doing this alternating nonsense because it's really starting to fracture the consistency of the team. Montana had a solid year with 18 touchdown passes and 3 rushing. Roger Craig was probably their best player this year.
Yeah, I think he was all-purpose yards leader. Yeah. Because that's kind of like we were saying, like, they couldn't rely on who was going to be quarterback, so they didn't necessarily get in a rhythm with their receivers. But I feel like Craig could just kind of run it consistently throughout the season, but they really had such a bad start in the first 10, 11 games that I don't think people thought they were going to be a playoff team.
No, They started, like I said, 6-5 despite Craig's 2,000 plus yards from scrimmage. Tom Rathman was their fullback, who was also really good.
Yep.
As a pass catcher as well. Between the two of them, they had 118 catches, which is hilarious considering both went to Nebraska, where they never threw the ball during that time period. Rice was first team All-Pro, though, that year.
Of course.
Over 20 yards a catch, 9 touchdowns. And then Mike Wilson was their number 2. And John Taylor, their number 3, made the Pro Bowl as a special teamer. 2 punt return touchdowns this year. Yeah, so they're kind of working him into the lineup as the number 3. Solid tight ends and John Frank, Ron Heller, and Brent Jones. And then the offensive line is where you can see kind of the older guys and the younger guys all together with Randy Cross was playing his last game in there, Guy McIntyre, Harris Barton, Jesse Sapolu, and Steve Wallace. So they were a pretty stable offensive line, a nice mix of young and old. They finished 7th in points per game, but 1st in turnovers, which if you're playing the Bengals, they might take advantage of that.
Yes.
They had such an incredible coaching staff, though. I wanted to point out Mike Holm. There's 5 or 6 guys who later became head coaches in the 90s on this staff, like Mike Holmgren and Dennis Green, Ray Rhodes, who's on the defensive side. George Seifert, who will be their next coach after this game, is their defensive coordinator. They ran a 3-4 scheme, lots of sacks up front. Michael Carter made the Pro Bowl at nose tackle, and Our guy, Chris.
Old Mr. Piss in your helmet.
Naked warrior himself leads this team in sacks. Charles Haley is finally starting and just absolutely wrecking shit this season. 11.5 sacks, a solid veteran secondary with Eric Wright, Don Griffin and Tim McKyer, as well as Jeff Fuller and Ronnie Lott, future Hall of Famer Ronnie Lott. Special teams, Mike Kofor was pretty inconsistent as their kicker. Barry Helton was their punter. They had a new kicker and punter this year, actually. And John Taylor made the Pro Bowl, obviously, with 2 punt return TDs. So they got hot at the right time in the season when they settled on Montana. They avenged their loss to the Vikings in the divisional round and beat them. And then beat them 34-9. Montana had 3 passing TDs to Rice in that game. And then in the NFC title game, they have to go to Chicago to play Hurricane Ditka in the cold, and they absolutely kicked the crap out of them.
And that's the thing, going into this big game, San Francisco really took care of the Vikings and the Bears, in so much so that they were like, oh, this is the team that we all thought was going to be like the regular season, champs or whatever, and they're really, like you said, clicking at the right time.
Yeah, they beat them 28-3. Montana again with 3 touchdowns. Rathman with a TD rush. The game was essentially over at halftime. Is how well they handled them, and a lot of people were kind of thinking, oh, I don't know if Cincinnati stands a chance in this game.
A lot of people thought Cincinnati was going to get blown out. That was the thing, just coming into it, especially with the 49ers being this team of the 80s, or what we see, they already had 2, championships under their belts in the 80s, and going into this big game, they were heavy favorites.
They were heavy favorites, and there are a lot of intriguing storylines because you have the Paul Brown, Bill Walsh connection where he was passed over as Cincinnati's head coach, and Brown may or may not have tried to blackball him from getting other head coaching jobs before he landed in San Francisco. You have the Walsh and the Sam White's friendship, which was also an intriguing story. And only the 3rd time ever a Super Bowl rematch happened.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the night before the game, Cincinnati runs into a little bit of trouble, Chris, where one of their players makes an all-time bonehead mistake. Want to get into that?
Well, what exactly happened? Let me say that, because you lay it out.
Okay, so as I had mentioned before, fullback Stanley Wilson, who was probably going to be a large part of their game plan on the Joe Robbie Stadium grass.
Going into it.
Yeah.
And this is the way their offense was lining up the last 2 games. very run heavy, very
protect Esiason, but move the ball.
Yes.
And you're going to need to spell Brooks and Woods at some point. Stanley Wilson does not end up getting to play in this game. And why doesn't he get to play in the game, Chris?
Because he's a fucking idiot.
Yes.
And I've seen this. You see this happen multiple times. I don't understand the thought process of what you're thinking of right before this giant game.
To quote Rick James, cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Thank you. Because he gets busted.
He gets popped for drugs before
and
the
not
game.
only, and so this is what keeps blowing my mind. Not only does he get busted before, but he's partying the night before.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, I get it. Where it's if you're whatever, like the weekend, whatever.
After the game, you can go do whatever you want.
It's literally the night before. That's the thing that always blows my mind, where you're like, even if you're not getting busted, are you going to be that like hungover? Are you still going to be fucked up? Like, are you going into that next game and you're like, dude, I just need a bump. We're going to get going. We're going to do this. No. Give me the rock. No.
Not the crack rock.
Damn it.
One rock of crack, please.
One rock of crack.
Pepper Jack love Fraggle Rock.
Thank you for being so kind.
Oh my God.
And understanding. But that's the mentality that I keep, like, I really just don't understand, because partying's one thing. Partying before the biggest game of your life is another.
And you know you're already in the drug protocol, which in the 80s in the NFL was like very draconian as compared to now.
So he had to have been pretty blatant with it.
Yeah.
Or at least, like, I don't know what their policy was exactly. So I don't know how the sequence of events went. But
the worst was when Sam Weich was talking about having to explain to him in his hotel room, like, you're not going to play in the game and you may not ever play again in the NFL. And he never did, which is tragic, but like, come on, dude. Like, one game. You just got one more. You have a whole off season to possibly relapse.
Yeah.
But that's the thing with addiction. So they lose a very focal point of their offense just hours before the game starts.
I can't even imagine, too, going into the locker room. Do you know what I mean? And being like, hey, because,
I'm sure he probably didn't interact with anybody, because there were probably some guys who probably wanted to beat the shit out of him.
Fuck, man. I could only imagine.
So let's talk about the game.
Going into the
game, we have all these awesome storylines. We're in Miami at Joe Robbie Stadium.
Maybe that was the problem. They were in Miami.
Yeah, they were in Miami. Should have been in like Minneapolis or something.
He would have been there if they were in Minneapolis. He would have been dressed. He would have been ready.
Different kind of snowfall in Indianapolis, Minneapolis, Indiana. Whatever. Just
any
shitty.
One of those. He
weather.
Just got to stop skiing in Miami.
Got to stop skiing in Miami. Is it snowing? It sure is.
Sure is.
So Super Bowl XXIII, Cincinnati ends up kicking off. San Francisco starts putting together a bit of a drive. Reversed by Rice on the first play, which is, if you're not familiar, an old Paul Brown offense play. Walsh, whenever he played against him, liked to kind of stick it to him.
Yep.
Gained 6. Just the first play actually in Super Bowl XVII between the two teams was an old Paul Brown play. So you have that kind of, spider web going here in it. Roger Craig ends up getting the first down with a nice catch. Steve Wallace, though, their left tackle, gets hurt, sprains his ankle, and he's iced for the game.
Which is pretty big.
We talked about this before, too. Like, the biggest game of your life, and within the first couple of minutes, you get iced.
And you're obviously out for the rest of the game. There's a bit of a hole there where the run game isn't going to be as effective.
No, because Cincinnati's defense in this game, they had a plan, and they executed it for about 57 minutes to perfection.
Yeah.
57 minutes, Chris.
Yep.
A bad snap on third down just utterly kills the drive, and Cincy gets the ball, and they're starting to look pretty hot. And they're using the run game very effectively.
Well, it's obvious that their game plan is working.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where you come in, they stop them right away, and then, man.
Brown as a
They
first.
had all those.
Yeah, if they had Stanley Wilson, we might be talking about first down. Eddie Brown has a 17-yard catch. Then Woods goes for another 8 past midfield. Although Brooks is stuffed, Woods converts a 3rd and 3. And they have a first down in San Francisco territory and get all the way down to the 39 to set up a 3rd and 5. Unfortunately, an incomplete pass to McGee from Esiason. And like I said, I think in both playoff games he completed, leading into this, less than 10 passes.
Yeah.
So they could have used another. They should have just kept running the ball. If you think about it in this game, San Francisco gets the ball down inside their own 5 on a great punt. Ray Horton ends up covering the kick with 8:16 left in the first quarter from their own 3. There's a big run by Craig for 11, but we come to another horrific injury in this game, Chris. Crumray, while following the play, his leg just basically snaps.
It really looks like it folds.
Yeah.
You know, where like a chair just kind of like folds almost on its own. And you're like, oh, like it really. I wonder if he had injured it earlier. You know how like you get something injured earlier and then you just kind of like he was using it and then it's just like.
Well, and he's talked about it because he's engaged with one of the linemen on the play, and as he's pursuing and tries to turn, his leg just gets caught in the grass, and it just gives. It completely gives. What ends up happening is he fractures both bones in his lower leg, his weight-bearing and non-weight-bearing bones. Ugh. He said, I was just being an idiot, too much adrenaline. Which is, like,
that makes sense. Not the cocaine the night before.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Giving it your all, you know what? I'll look the other way on that one.
Shit.
So San Francisco, which sucks because he's your best defensive player.
I was going to say, so this kind of opens up San Francisco. It really, like, the game plan almost changes for this because of these 2 injuries.
Yeah, definitely. They end up driving the ball. Rice gets another first down all the way down to the Cincinnati 33. Coupled with a roughing the passer penalty, they drive to the Cincy 24, but they end up having an incompletion on 3rd down, and they send out Kofor for a 42-yard field goal and end up getting points out of it. They drove it basically like 80-plus yards. Granted, it doesn't end in a touchdown, but they take a nice 3-0 lead.
They take that first lead going into it.
And at this point in Super Bowl history, most teams that get the lead end up winning the game.
Yep.
Cincinnati gets the ball 1st and 10 at their own 20. Brooks goes for 3. Woods gets another 8. And gets another first down, and you're thinking, man, they are really humming. They are really humming. But on the next play, Woods gets absolutely destroyed by Ronnie Lott. Coming through the hole, he just comes screaming and pops him. And Woods is like 230 pounds.
If you watch this, too, it's one of probably the best hit of this game. But it's just one of those where you're just like, oh, yeah. I forgot that Ronnie Lott could absolutely light guys up because it's really one of those great ones.
He was shuffling on back to the sideline after that one. Really could have used Wilson. He'd carried it 4 times for 28 yards before the game had kind of changed. But Esiason still can't get going in the passing game, and on 3rd and 9, he's almost picked by Lott, and they have to punt again. They punt it back to Taylor, and then San Francisco gets another big drive going, and you're thinking, they're going to start beating the brakes off of them. Rice gets a one-handed catch for a first down. We'll talk more about Jerry Rice in this game and what a dominant person he was. To their own 45 for 16 yards. Great Craig catch gets him to the Cincy 46 for 8. And then they just kind of start dinking and dunking it down the field until a 30-yard catch gets him to the Cincinnati 10. Rathman gets stuffed on first down. An incompletion to Frank on second down sets up a 3rd and goal where they call a very smart play by today's NFL standards. They set up 4 wide and give Rathman the ball, and he gets it down to about the 1.5-yard line. And you're thinking, if this was today's NFL, that's good because you're probably going to go for it.
You're going to go for it.
On 4th down. At this stage in the game, it would have been, what we see in 2022, 2023. But on fourth down, Walsh elects to go for a field goal.
Which is very 80s, 90s conservative, where even though it's 1 yard, even if they lose it, it would be on, the one. He goes for the safe play, which I think was kind of a mistake, but it should be gimme points.
And with Craig and Rathman, just run the ball at that point.
Yes.
I mean, even with Wallace out, after that 9-yard run, you should have been thinking, our running back just made the Pro Bowl and led the league in all-purpose yards.
Let's
and we
give
have
it
a
to
great
him.
fullback.
Yep.
Yeah. But they set up for a Kofor 19-yard field goal, and he completely fucking shanks it.
Yep. That's the thing, and that's the thing that Walsh was probably thinking was, well, this is a gimme 3. It's going to give it a 6-0 lead, as opposed to it being 3-0. But then literally he shanks it, and you're like, well, that was horrible.
The laces were in, Chris.
Oh.
The laces were in. Cincinnati gets the ball back. Really can't do anything with it. Griffin has a pass breakup on this drive. Woods only has a run for a couple of yards. Basically watching for Ronnie Lott now. I mean, putting the fear of God into him. Sets up a third down, and Brown catches it short of the sticks, and they have to punt again. And while they get off a great punt, the ball kind of rolls to about the 9-yard line. And Taylor decides to make potentially a mistake by picking it up, but then he gets a lane, Chris. And he starts scooting.
I was going to say, if you look at it, he really should be tackled right there.
Yeah.
But he has a lane, and he takes it all the way onto the outside, and he makes one mistake.
Yep.
Where instead of going to the inside, he goes to the outside, and they just kind of like draw him out, or they just, play him out of bounds, and you can see his reaction.
Yep.
Because he slams the ball on the ground like, damn it, because he had to beat one defender.
And that's the thing. There had not been before a punt return for a Super Bowl touchdown in a Super Bowl, and there hasn't been one ever.
No.
That was probably the closest they've ever come to having it. But we'll talk about him later.
Yep.
They get the ball to the 47 of Cincinnati. They really kind of piss away a good opportunity because Montana has a backwards lateral, which was a missed screen to Harry Sidney, the backup running back, and they lose 9 yards. Then he's sacked by Buck with some great pressure, which sets up a 3rd and 21. So they basically say, all right, screw it, we'll just draw it to Craig. He has a pretty good run, but he ends up fumbling the ball, and Jim Scow recovers it at Cincinnati's own 41, which, the mistake on special teams is pretty much negated by your defense.
Yep.
Since he gets the ball back, Chris Collinsworth has a nice catch on this drive, the old Wooderson of the NFL. Brooks has a first down run for 10 yards, and then Esiason decides to throw into quadruple coverage to McGee. 2nd and 10, he has to throw it away, and then in 3rd and 10, he's sacked by Danny Stubbs with some excellent pressure by Charles Haley and his penis.
Well, that's what happens when you pee into a helmet. So.
I wonder what he did before this game to psych himself up. You wonder about that, Chris? Like what he was doing?
Sacrifice the live chicken.
Sacrifice. Montana's probably in the 3rd quarter. Should have gotten him a live chicken. Niners get the ball back at their own 11. We're kind of late in the 2nd quarter here. Craig is stuffed on first down, then an incompletion to him on 2nd and 10. Ends up converting, though, with a nice Roger Craig catch, who played a huge role in this game. Although he was stuffed by Fulcher on the following play. Frank has an 8.5-yard catch, but unfortunately there's a flag for holding on Randy Cross, which kind of destroys the drive. Yep. Puts him at 2nd and 20, and then Skip McClendon takes Craig down in the backfield. So it's 3rd and 23, and they can only end up not making it and end up having to punt on 4th down. But finally, the Bengals start doing something on offense on this late 2nd quarter drive. Woods has a 7-yard run, and then McGee has a huge catch to put him down to the San Francisco 23. We're at the 2-minute warning now. Woods again is lit up by Bill Romanowski on a following run. And then on 3rd down, they end up not converting, but Jim Breach comes out with his size 5 shoe.
Yep.
Size 5, Chris.
It's crazy.
Puts a wallop, and it said he had 6 kids. So you know that guy with small feet, Fox. That's all I'm going to say. 34-yard field goal to tie the game, and it's 3-3. San Francisco tries to put a drive together with 1:10 left in the half. Start moving it with Craig, get to their own 42, but unfortunately they end up not scoring. Yeah. So we're at halftime and it's 3-3,
which is crazy going into this game where I feel like a lot of people thought San Francisco was going to blow them out. There were chances that they should have scored.
Yeah.
And then we go into it and you're like, oh, this is anybody's game.
But if you're Cincinnati, you go into halftime going like, we're still in this game.
Absolutely.
Like, we played like kind of garbage in certain like areas. We lost our best defensive player. Our running back, who we were going to use, is not even playing.
Boomer can't get his shit together.
And it's still tied.
Yep.
So it's still tied. They get the ball out of the second half. It said Esiason was 4 for 12 in the first half.
Yeah, I saw that. That was pretty brutal.
That's not good. No. Even for the 80s, that's not good.
Yeah.
There was a holding on the kickoff, which kind of pushes him back. End up getting a first down on a couple runs by Woods and Brooks. Collinsworth has a great catch down to the San Francisco 48. Unfortunately, a holding call on Doug Reimers basically negates the entire drive.
Yep.
It just sets him behind. A lot of penalties in this game, Chris. But while it kills part of the drive, Cincinnati ends up moving the ball with some really great plays by James Brooks and receptions by Collinsworth. But they have another penalty again on Kazurski, their center, kind of one of those snap type of to draw guys off. Drive stalls at the San Francisco 25 after a Woods run is completely stopped, an incompletion, and then another illegal procedure penalty. But Breach comes in and he kicks a field goal to put them up 6-3 for 43 yards.
So now going into this, Bengals are up 3 points.
And the drive, I wanted to point out, it was 12 plays and took over 9 minutes.
Yep.
So essentially, this is the game plan they probably had coming into the game.
Yes.
Just not with all the penalty flags. San Francisco gets the ball back at their own 31. Montana scrambles for a first down. Craig goes for another 5 on the ground. A first down for Rice off a 13-yard catch. Keeps him moving the sticks. Unfortunately, Montana is sacked by Reggie Williams, which sets up a 3rd and 9. And the incompletion to Craig has him punting late in the third quarter, which is like, what the hell? What is going on in this game?
Yeah, if you're a 49ers fan, you're wondering if the offense is ever really going to get going because you have some receptions to Rice, you have some movement on the ground, but it's really nothing. There's no there's no red zone conversion. There's nothing.
Tell that Walsh is probably kicking himself over that decision in the first half.
Yep, to not go for it.
Because if you think about it, even if you don't make it, Cincinnati, who hasn't moved it at all, is starting at their own 1-yard line.
Yeah.
At worst.
Exactly.
So the Bengals get the ball with just under 2.5 left in the third quarter at their own 18. Unfortunately, Esiason throws a pick to Romanowski and sends the defense back onto the field again.
Which I feel is pretty big. So if we get into this where they just had a series of plays take 9 minutes off the clock, and then they come back out and he throws this interception to Romanowski where you look and you're like, oh, San Francisco can still be in this game. Because if they march down, take a shit ton of time off, and even just get a field goal, I feel like that could have really given them the game, or at least been...
Even a field goal to, like, get them out of their own red zone?
Yes. Yes.
So... the 49ers, though, kind of struggle to convert here. Rice drops a pass on first down. Craig is stopped on second down, pretty much for about a 3-yard gain. And then on 3rd and 7, Rice ends up getting 6 yards. And again, they have to punt.
Yep.
They have to, or not punt, they have to kick a field goal. And luckily for them, Kofor makes it from 32 yards out. The laces were out that time, Chris.
There you go. So it's 6-6.
So it's 6-6 with 50 seconds left in the third quarter. And San Francisco sets up for a kickoff. And we have our first touchdown of the game, Chris.
And this touchdown is such a great one. I feel like this guy, what's his name?
Stanford Jennings. Yeah. He was the backup's backup.
I was just going to say.
At running back.
He was not their first choice. And he just had a kid like 2 days before or something like that.
His daughter Kelsey was born, yeah. And everyone's rooting for him.
Yes.
He's playing in this game.
It's the feel-good of feel-good stories. He picks it up on like the 2 or...
the 7.
The 7.
Yeah.
And has just a giant hole.
Nobody touches him.
Until literally on the 1.
The goal line. Yeah. So the second kickoff return in Super Bowl history for a touchdown, 93 yards, and now it's 13-6 Bengals.
And if you're a Bengals fan, 49ers haven't done anything offensively. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, this could be us.
And Tim Krumrie is still in the locker room after they set his leg, refusing to go to the hospital, refusing painkillers so he can remember the game, Chris?
Yes.
They don't make people like that anymore. I just don't think they do. So you're thinking 13-6. We're starting the fourth quarter. All the Bengals really need to do is kind of hunker down for a couple of drives, and they might have this one in the bag. Unfortunately, they're starting at their own. San Francisco starts at their own 15, and this becomes the Jerry Rice show for the remainder of the game.
Yes, where I imagine if you're Joe Montana, you're just like, look, he's my first option every time.
Yeah.
That's just, I mean, it's probably that way a lot of the time, but like in this fourth quarter, that's why I imagine he's just like always like, Jerry, you ready?
Yeah.
I'm ready.
So they start at their own 15, big catch and run by Rice on the first play. Then he gets them all the way down to the Cincinnati 14 with an awesome catch and run. And it's just like one of those horror movies, like freaking Michael Myers, just like with Montana, like do-do-do-do-do-do-do. But Montana almost cocks this drive up as he's looking, I believe, for Rice in the end zone, and Lewis Billups drops what should have been a cake-easy interception.
Like through his hands to the point where you're like, oh, I could have caught that. I mean,
if he catches that ball and it's a touchback, and Cincinnati, they don't even need to score on the next drive, but just take a bunch of time off, like that could have just wrecked San Francisco. Yeah.
And you're like you said, it was like a gimme interception where it was almost too easy, where I imagine he took his eyes off the ball and you're like, you took your eyes off the ball.
Yeah, looking for Taylor on that play, trying to go away from Rice. But on the next play, he throws it to Jerry Rice.
Yep.
Amazing catch and run, gets the ball just inside the pylon to make it 13-13. Cincinnati takes over. Just under 14 minutes left in the game at their own 35 because the kick went out of bounds. And Brown has a 7-yard catch. Woods gets him a first down with 4 yards. Woods stopped for 3. And then Haley gets a huge sack with Esiason in the grass, basically, with Larry Roberts. And on 3rd and 15, he misses an open Collinsworth because our man Charles Haley was putting the pressure on. He always showed up in big games, Chris.
He definitely did. So
showed up in a lot of places. San Francisco gets the ball back. Taylor muffs the punt, but luckily he ends up getting it recovered because that could have been a huge play for Cincinnati to get the ball.
That would have been ridiculous.
Yeah. Probably should have been called kick-catch interference, though, because taking over at their own 18 with 11 to go. Great catch by Rice, gets him down to the Cincinnati 47. Craig gets him down to the 31. And on 3rd and 4, there was an incompletion to John Taylor. So they bring out Kofor for a 49-yard field goal. And what happens, Chris?
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
Got something in my throat. He rips it.
Oh, he rips it. Not inside the uprights. So Cincinnati gets some decent field position at their own 31.
And I feel like the kick. Do you feel like they should have went for the kick?
I mean, it's 4th and 4. Why not?
Okay,
go for it. Why not go for it?
I feel like they've been conservative all game, and
I don't know. At that stage, I think you just got to
for a 50-yarder.
Yeah,
I agree.
Cincinnati takes advantage though. On 3rd and 13. Ira Hillary gets his first catch, and he only had 5 all season to move the sticks. Then Woods gets him to the 44 on a run. Then they start imposing their will on the offensive line on this drive and
do what I imagine their game plan was from the start, which was just kind of like a ground and pound,
Yeah. Brooks has a 12-yard catch on this drive too. Then there's false start, unfortunately, but Woods gets 5 on that play. It's now Esiason on 3rd and 11 after a Jennings run. They basically drive it all the way into the red zone, and they don't go for the kill. They just give Jennings the ball up the middle to see what he can get, just to try and set up an easier field goal.
And I agree where they really did not go for the end zone once, which is a weird set. It's a weird set of plays, but you almost see it as being as conservative as they can be and saying, like, you have to beat us on this last drive.
You have to get at least a field goal because Breach makes it from 40 yards with just over 3 minutes left, and it's 16-13. And Boomer Esiason talked about how he was the representative for Disney World. Like, I'm going to Disney World, and the people came up to him after the game, or not after the game, but during this point in the game, and were getting him to say his lines. Like, I'm going to Disney World.
Make sure you say your lines. Make sure you got it right, because you're... And like I was saying, San Francisco's offense, outside of this last drive with Jerry Rice, really wasn't clicking. And it really wasn't, outside of Rice, really wasn't clicking.
No, not particularly, but there's just over 3 minutes left. There's a penalty on the kick return.
Which I love so much because it pushes them all the way back to the 8.
To the 8-yard line.
With 3:04?
Yeah. 3:04 to go, and what was it? Collinsworth said to Weich on the sideline, "I think we gave him too much time."
It's such a great, because the other thing that he says is, "Play like champions. We're champions. Play like." That's what he's saying to his Bengal team, and they're going out like, "Yeah, we are champions," because no team has ever done this. No quarterback has ever had a drive for a Super Bowl to win. You know what I mean? Like
90-plus yards, 92 yards.
Yep.
Yeah. So when they get in the huddle, there's the famous story of Joe Montana
I love this.
calming his guys down. You want to tell it, Chris?
This might be my favorite football story ever. So they're on the 8. They're setting up. He's about to call his play. He looks to the stands, and he just goes, "Is that John Candy over there?" And everybody kind of looks over, and it's like,
that is John Candy.
That is John Candy. And then he just goes right back to
into becoming arguably the greatest quarterback who's ever played.
But this is what I heard from players that were in that, where he just goes, it killed the tension, because you can only imagine what the tension was like walking into that huddle, and then he says something like that, like he pretty much set them up to have this relaxed drive that he knew that they could do.
And they just come out. He comes out clicking. Like, I mean, it's like the West Coast offense of the dink and dunk to perfection, which set up the bigger plays.
And it's what you thought they were going to do all day.
Yeah.
And they just did it. Like you said, the Bengals game plan worked for 57 minutes.
It was perfect for 57 minutes on defense.
Man.
So starting at their own 8. Gets them out of their own kind of end zone area with an 8-yard. Just dump off to Craig, which is like, those are the plays you remember as like, that was what sets everything else up.
Yep.
Finds Frank for another 9 yards to get him a first down. Then Rice gets 12 and 22 yards before Craig is stuffed running the ball to set up the 2-minute warning. Craig runs a draw, and then Rice gets another catch to get him down to the Cincinnati 47 with 1:49. So it took almost no time off the clock to get past midfield.
Yep.
Craig goes over the middle, gets it to the Cincy 36. They're bringing no heat, which I did not understand on this drive. You can't let someone like Montana just sit back there. And I think Merlin Olsen or Dick Enberg was like, the Bengals are only rushing 3 men.
Yes. And it was you could almost tell they're almost playing scared. They're playing not to lose as opposed to win, and you really see it because he's not under pressure on almost any of these passes. So.
Yeah. Luckily for them, there's a holding play on Randy Cross, which puts him at 2nd and 20. I mean, luckily for the Bengals.
Yep.
But then Jerry Rice runs a post route and gets all the way down to the Cincinnati 18. Ray Horton, if he doesn't make that tackle, Rice scores on this play, which might have actually benefited Cincinnati with time left on the clock.
So I saw this right here. So he gets down to the 18, and then they don't call a timeout. Mm-hmm. And they San Francisco let some time run, and then they run a play.
Yeah. Craig gets him down to the 10 on an 8-yard catch, which sets up 2nd and 2 with 39 seconds left in the game. And what happens, Chris?
It is a really perfect pass to catch Taylor, to hit Taylor in stride.
And how many catches in this game did John Taylor have leading up to this? 0.
This is literally his first catch.
His first catch in the Super Bowl is one of the most iconic plays in NFL history.
I was just going to say, the play from the angle from right behind Montana, because you could see the ball literally perfectly go into, he almost didn't even have to, close his arms around the ball. That's literally how perfect the pass was. First catch of the evening to literally win the big game.
Yeah, because there's 39 seconds left. There are 34 seconds
left. And Boomer's
left.
not going to...
He's not going to Disney World.
No, he's not going to... Hey, bud, don't worry about those lines.
We're going to find that Montana guy. He seems to want to go and do that. Cincinnati ends up getting the ball back. Brooks is back there for the kick return, hoping for an electric play. But another sack by Haley on this drive. 3rd down overthrow to Collinsworth, and then a 4th down incompletion. End it for the Bengals. They were so damn close, Chris. Yes. They were so close.
And they had the game plan to win, and I just feel like Rice and Montana were just that much better.
Yeah, when it came down to your best against our best, their best was just simply better than them, unfortunately. And they win 20-16.
Yep. So San Francisco wins Super Bowl XXIII, 20-16. I saw this quote where they said, the best players ever don't have to be the best players for the whole game. They just have to be the best players when it counts. And I was like, that was like this game, because in the 4th quarter, it was almost like a different San Francisco team.
Yeah, and when you think about it, Montana won 4 Super Bowls with San Francisco. This was actually the only one he wasn't the MVP in, because Rice had one of the best games by a wide receiver in Super Bowl history.
Because it wasn't just the catches, it was the catches and the runs after. It was all of it that he did, the big plays and the big situations, him coming huge in the 4th. And
to think of being Sam Wyche, we took Eddie Brown, who had a nice career, made Pro Bowls,
he was fine,
over Jerry Rice. Oh my gosh. So Super Bowl XXIII ends, and both franchises go in completely different directions after this.
We get a Steve Young.
But I mean, even though Bill Walsh retires after this game, it was the last game he ever coached in the NFL. George Seifert takes over, and in '89, they have arguably one of the top 5 teams in NFL history. They had something like 18 consecutive road wins between this year and the following season. They end up finishing 14-2 and beating Denver in the Super. They win another Super Bowl in the '90s because all of these new players are now veterans in '94 with our buddy Kenny Norton in that game. They end up finishing with currently 5 Super Bowls. But this was almost this is just like a knife in the pooper for the Bengals.
And it like you said, it really has 2 franchises going in 2 different directions, where you had a lot of hype behind this Cincinnati team, and in the 90s they were...
Oh, that's the Bengals era, man.
Yeah, they were a joke.
In '89, they missed the playoffs. 1990, they win a playoff game after winning the AFC Central. And then from 1991 until 2004, it's not that they missed the playoffs, it's just how bad they are.
Yep.
It's just how horrendously terrible that they are. Where you even have guys in that span like Dick LeBeau and Bruce Coslett as your head coaches, and they could never get it right. They could never get it right until Marvin Lewis showed up, and they still couldn't win playoff games.
But it wasn't like a 3-12 season.
And then now they're actually good. And frighten the shit out of me. But
they are. But it was just a big game that had two teams go in two different directions. But it really made a stamp that made the 49ers be like, we're the team of the 80s.
Yeah.
And they really kind of proved it with Montana and Rice being like, we're the top duo. Come at us.
Come at us. And then, we'll just replace this Montana guy with Steve Young.
I know. That's kind of ridiculous.
I mean, that's insane. But Super Bowl XXIII, probably one of the few in the 80s that was actually good.
The only one?
Yeah, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.